Hello, we're going to be reading Chapter 7 in The Magician's Nephew, What Happened at the Front Door. What happened at the front door? "Now, slave, how long am I to wait for my chariot?" thundered the witch. Uncle Andrew cowered away from her. Now that she was really present, all the silly thoughts he had had while looking at himself in the glass were oozing out of him. But Aunt Letty at once got up from her knees, came over to the center of the room. "And who is this young person, Andrew, may I ask?" said Aunt Letty in icy tones. "Distinguished foreigner, a very important person," he stammered. "Rubbish," said Aunt Letty, and then turning to the witch, "Get out of my house this moment, you shameless hussy, or I'll send for the police." She thought the witch must be someone out of a circus, and she did not approve of her bare arms. "What woman is this?" said Jadis. "Down on your knees, minion, before I blast you." "No strong language in this house, if you please, young woman," said Aunt Letty. And instantly it seemed to Uncle and Andrew the Queen towered up to even greater height. Fire flashed from her eyes. She flung out her arms with the same gesture and the horrible-sounding words that had lately turned the palace gates of charm to dust. But nothing happened, except that Aunt Letty, thinking that those horrible words were meant to be ordinary English, said, "I thought as much. This woman is drunk. Drunk! She can't even speak clearly." It must have been a terrible moment for the witch when she suddenly realized that her power of turning people into dust, which had been quite real in her own world, was not going to work in ours. She did not lose her nerve, even for a second. Without wasting a thought on her disappointment, she lunged forward, caught Aunt Letty round the neck and the knees, and raised her high above her head as if she had been no heavier than a doll, and threw her across the room. While Aunt Letty was still hurling through the air, the housemaid, who was having a beautifully exciting morning, put her head in the door and said, "If you please, sir, the hansom's come." "Lead on, slave," said the witch to Uncle Andrew. He began muttering something about, "Oh, regrettable violence, must really protest," but at a single glance from Jadis became speechless. She drove him out of the room and out of the house. Diggory came running down the stairs just in time to see the front door close behind them. "Jiminy," he said, "she's loose in London with London and with Uncle Andrew. I wonder what on earth's going to happen now." "Oh, Master Diggory," said the housemaid, who was really having a wonderful day, "I think Miss Ketterly's hurt herself somehow," so they both rushed into the drawing room to find out what happened. If Aunt Letty had fallen on bare floors or even the carpet, I suppose all her bones would have been broken, but by a good luck she had fallen on the mattress. Aunt Letty was a very tough old lady. Aunts often were in those days, and after she had some sal volatile, she sat there for a few minutes, and she said there was nothing the matter with her except for a few bruises. Very soon she was taking charge of the situation. "Sarah," she said to the housemaid, who had never had such a day before, "go round to the police station at once and tell them that there is a dangerous lunatic at large. I will take Mrs. Kirk's lunch up myself." Mrs. Kirk was, of course, Diggory's mother. When Mother's lunch had been seen to, Diggory and Aunt Letty had their own. After that he did some hard thinking. The problem was how to get the witch back into her own world, or at any rate out of ours, as soon as possible. Whatever happened, she must not be allowed to go rampaging about the house. Mother must not see her, and if possible she must not be allowed to go rampaging around London either. Diggory had not been in the drawing room when she had tried to blast Aunt Letty, but he had seen her blast at the gates of charm, so he knew her terrible powers and did not know that she had lost any of them by coming into our world, and he knew that she meant to conquer our world. At the present moment, as far as he could see, she might be blasting Buckingham Palace or the House of Parliament, and it was most certain that quite a number of policemen had by now been reduced to little heaps of dust, and there didn't seem to be anything he could do about that. But the rings seem to work like magnets, thought Diggory. If I can only touch her with the slip of my yellow, we shall both go into the wood between the worlds, I wonder. Will she still go all faint again in there? Was that something the place does to her, or was only the shock of being pulled out of her own world. But I suppose I'll have to risk that. And how am I supposed to find the beast? I don't suppose Aunt Letty would let me go out, not unless I said where I was going, and I haven't got more than 2 pence. I'd need any amount of money for buses and trams if I went looking all over London. Anyway, I haven't the faintest idea where to look, and wonder if Uncle Andrew is still with her. It seemed in the end that the only thing left to do was to wait and hope that Uncle Andrew and the witch would come back. If they did, he must rush out and get hold of the witch and put on his yellow ring before she had the chance to get into the house. This meant that he must watch the front door like a cat watching a mouse's hole. Lost my place. And he dared not leave his post for a moment, so he went into the dining room and glued his face, as so they say, to the window, and it was a bow window from which you could see the steps up to the front door and see up and down the street, so that no one could reach the front door without your knowing. I wonder what Polly's doing, thought Diggory. He wondered about this a good deal as the first slow half-hour ticked on, but you need not wonder, for I am going to tell you. She had gone home late for dinner, with her shoes and stockings very wet, and they had asked her where she'd been and what on earth she'd been doing. She said she'd been out with Diggory Kirk. Upon further questioning, she said she got her feet wet in a pool of water, that the pool was in a wood, and asked where the wood was. She said she didn't know, and asked if it was in one of the parks. She said, truthfully enough, that she supposed it might be a sort of park. And from all this, Polly's mother got the idea that Polly had gone off without telling anyone to some part of London she didn't know, gone into a strange park, and amused herself by jumping into puddles. As a result, she was told that she had been very naughty indeed, and that she wouldn't be allowed to play with that Kirk boy any more if anything of the sort ever happened again. And she was given dinner with all the nice parts laughed out, and sent to bed for 2 solid hours. It was a thing that happened to one quite often in those days. So while Diggory was staring out of the dining room, Polly was lying in bed, and both were thinking how terribly slow the time could go. I think myself, I would rather have been in Polly's position. She only had to wait for the end of the 2 hours, but every minute Diggory would hear a cab or a baker's van or a butcher's boy coming around the corner and think, here she comes, only to find that it wasn't. And in between these false alarms, for what seemed like hours and hours, the clock ticked on, and one big fly, high up and far out of reach, buzzed against the window. It was one of those houses that get very quiet and dull in the afternoon, and always seem to smell of mutton. During his long watch and waiting, one small thing happened, which I will have to mention because something important came of it later on. A lady called with some grapes for Diggory's mother. As the dining room door was open, Diggory couldn't help overhearing Aunt Letty and the lady as they talked in the hall. "What lovely grapes!" came Aunt Letty's voice. "I'm sure if anything could do her good, these would. But poor dear little Mabel, I'm afraid it would need fruit from the land of youth to help her now. Nothing in this world will do much good." And then they both lowered their voices and said a lot more that could not be heard. If he had heard the bit about the land of youth a few days ago, he would have thought Aunt Letty was just talking without meaning anything in particular, the way grown-ups do, and it wouldn't have interested him. And he almost thought so even now. But suddenly it flashed upon his mind that now he knew, even if Aunt Letty didn't, that there really were other worlds, and that he himself had been in one of them. At any rate, there might be a real land of youth somewhere. There might be almost anything. There might be a fruit in some other world that could really cure his mother. And well, you know how it feels when you begin hoping for something against the hope because it's too good to be true, because you've been disappointed so often before, and that's how Diggory felt. But it was no good trying to throttle his hope. It might really just be true. So many odd things had happened already, and he had the magic rings, and there must be worlds you could get to through every pool in the wood, and you could hunt through them all, and then mother well again. Everything right again, and he forgot about watching for the witch. His hand was already going into his pocket where he kept the yellow ring. when at once he heard the sound of galloping. "Hello, what's that?" thought Diggory. "Fire engine? I wonder what house is on fire. Great Scott, it's coming here. Oh no, why, it's her." I needn't tell you who he meant by her. First came the hansom. There was no one in the driver's seat. On the roof, not sitting, but standing on the roof, swaying in a superb bounce as it came at full speed around the corner with one wheel in the air, was Queen Jadis, Queen of Queens and the terror of Charm. Her teeth were bared and her eyes shone like fire, and her long hair streamed out behind her like a comet's tail. She was flogging the horse without mercy. Its nostrils were wide and red, and its sides were spotted with foam. It galloped madly up to the front door, missing the lamppost by an inch, and reared up on its hind legs. The hansom crashed into the lamppost and shattered into several pieces. The witch, with a magnificent jump, had sprung clear just in time and landed on the horse's back. She settled herself astride and leaned forward, whispering things in its ear, and it must have been things meant not to quiet it, but to madden it, and was on its hind legs again in a moment, and its neigh was like a scream, and all its hooves and teeth and eyes tossing mane. Only a splendid rider could have stayed on its back. Before Diggory had recovered his breath, a good many other things began to happen. A second hansom dashed up close behind the first, and out of it jumped a fat man in a frock coat and a policeman. And there came a third hansom with two more policemen after it. After it came about 20 people, mostly errand boys on bicycles, all ringing their bells and letting out cheers and catcalls. Last of all came a crowd of people on foot, all very hot with running, but obviously enjoying themselves. Windows shot up in all the houses of the street, and a housemaid or a butler appeared at every front door. They wanted to see the fun. Meanwhile, an old gentleman had begun to struggle shakily out of the ruins of the first hansom. Several people pushed forward to help him, but as one pulled him away and another pulled him another, perhaps he would have gotten out. Here's a picture. He would have gotten out quite as quickly on his own. Diggory guessed that the old gentleman must be Uncle Andrew, but you couldn't see his face. His tall hat had been bashed down over it. Diggory rushed out and joined the crowd. That's the woman! That's the woman!" cried the fat man, pointing at Jadis. "Do your duty, constable. Hundreds and thousands of pounds worth she's taken out of my shop. Look at that rope of pearls around her neck. That's mine, and she's given me a black eye too, what's more." That she has, governor," said one of the crowd, "and a lovely black eye, as I'd wish to see. Beautiful bit of work that must have been. Gor, ain't she strong then? You ought to put a nice raw beefsteak on it, mister. That's what it want," said a butcher's boy. Now then, and the most important," said the most important of the policemen. "What's all this here?" "I tell you, she," began the fat man, when someone else called out, "Don't let the old cove in the cab get away. Put her up. Put her up to it." The old gentleman, who was certainly Uncle Andrew, just succeeded in standing up and was rubbing his bruises. "Now then," said the policeman, turning to him, "what's all this?" "Wuffle puff," came Uncle Andrew's voice from inside the hat. "None of that now," said the policeman sternly. "You'll find this is no laughing matter. Take that hat off, see?" This was more easily said than done, but after Uncle Andrew struggled in vain with the hat for some time, two other policemen seized it by the brim and forced it off. Thank you," said Uncle Andrew in a faint voice. "Thank you, dear me, I'm terribly shaken. If someone could give me a small glass of brandy." "Now, you attend to me, if you please," said the policeman, taking out a very large notebook and a very small pencil. "Are you in charge of that there young woman?" "Look out!" cried several voices, and the policeman jumped a step backward just in time. The horse had aimed a kick at which would have probably killed him. Then the witch wheeled the horse round so that she faced the crowd, with its hind legs were on the footpath. She had a long bright knife in her hand, and had been busily cutting the horse free from the wreck of the hansom. All this time Diggory had been trying to get a position from which he could touch the witch, and this wasn't easy at all, because on the side nearest to him there were too many people. In order to get round to the other side, he had to pass between the horse's hooves and the railings of the area that surrounded the house. For the Ketterley's house had a basement, and if you know anything about horses, especially if you had seen one in the state that horse was in at the moment, you will realize that this was a ticklish thing to do. Diggory knew lots about horses, but he set his teeth in and got ready to make a dash for it as soon as he saw a favorable moment. A red-faced man in a bowler hat now shouldered his way up to the front of the crowd. Hi, policeman, he said. That's my horse, what she's sitting on, same as it's my cab that she's made matchwood of. One at a time, please, one at a time, said the policeman. But there ain't no time, said the cabby. I know that 'orse better than you do. 'Tain't no ordinary 'orse. If father was a officer's charge in the cavalry, he was. And if the young woman goes on exciting him, he'll be murdered. They'll be murder done. Here, let me get hold of him. The policeman was only too glad to have a good reason for standing further away from the horse. The cabby took a step nearer, looked at Jadis, and said in a not unkindly voice, "Now, missy, let me get at his head, and you just get off. You're a lady, and now you don't want these roughs going for you, do you? You want to go on and have a nice cup of tea and lay down quiet like, and you'll feel ever so much better." At the same time, he stretched out his hand towards the horse's head with the words, "Steady, Strawberry, old boy, steady now." Then, for the first time, the witch spoke. "Dog," came her cold, clear voice, ringing loud above the other noises. "Dog, unhand our royal charger. We are the Empress Jadis." That is the end of chapter 7. Tomorrow will be the fight at the lamppost. Your questions are, what happened to Aunt Letty, and why was she okay? Who all came charging down the street? There were 3 groups. What were the 3 groups? How was Uncle Andrew feeling? And what is Queen Jadis up to? What do you think is her plan at this point? All right, I can't wait to have you answer the questions, and we'll read chapter 8 tomorrow.